Have you ever wondered why the deepest parts of our oceans are home to creatures that grow up to 10 times larger than their shallow water cousins? This is Abyssal Gigantism. In this comprehensive guide, we are going to explore the extreme biological adaptations that allow animals to reach staggering sizes in the dark, freezing abyss. Picture a world with no sunlight, water temperatures hovering just above freezing, and pressure that would crush a submarine built without the right reinforcement. That's the abyss, the deepest layer of the ocean, starting around 4,000 meters down and stretching past the reach of almost every research vessel on Earth. Humans have barely scratched the surface of it. When the bathyscaphe Trieste finally reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench's Challenger Deep, the deepest point on the planet, the descent alone took 4 hours and 47 minutes. The two men aboard, Jacques Picard and Don Walsh, looked out the window expecting emptiness. Instead, they found fish casually swimming past, thousands of meters below where most of us assume life can even exist. That single moment captures the whole mystery. Against every expectation, this crushing, lightless world keeps producing giants. Biologists call the pattern abyssal gigantism, and it shows up again and again across totally unrelated branches of the animal kingdom, from crustaceans to mollusks to worms that have nothing in common except the depth they call home. Take the giant isopod, Bathynomus giganteus. Its shallow water and land-dwelling relatives, the woodlice and pillbugs you'd find under a rock in your backyard, rarely grow past 3 to 5 centimeters, but drop below 500 meters into the cold and the dark, and that same basic body plan stretches out to 50 centimeters or more, nearly the length of a house cat. Same anatomy, same general blueprint, just scaled up to a size that would be unthinkable on land. Then there's the colossal squid, Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni, and this is where things get genuinely strange. It grows to roughly 10 meters in length and can weigh around half a ton, making it the heaviest invertebrate known to science. Its eyes alone measure 30 to 40 centimeters across, wider than a dinner plate, and they're the largest eyes ever recorded in the animal kingdom. Scientists think those massive eyes evolved to catch every last photon of light in a place where there's almost none to catch. The giant squid, its more famous cousin, actually grows longer, sometimes past 13 meters, but the colossal squid wins on raw mass because it's built thicker and heavier to survive even deeper, colder water. For centuries, sailors had only fragments to go on, a torn tentacle in a net, a beak in a sperm whale's stomach, and those fragments were enough to spawn legends like the Kraken. It took until the modern era of deep-sea trawling and submersible cameras for scientists to confirm that something this large was real. Swimming around in water, most ships never come close to touching. Even now, a fully intact, living colossal squid has almost never been filmed in its natural habitat. Though that changed in March 2025, when Schmidt Ocean Institute researchers captured the first confirmed footage of a live Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni in the deep, a genuinely historic moment. Before that, most of what we knew came from carcasses pulled up by fishing vessels or remains found inside the stomachs of sperm whales, which hunt them at depth and occasionally lose the fight badly enough to carry the scars. And these two are far from alone. Giant tube worms cluster around hydrothermal vents and stretch past 2.5 meters, growing fast and living only a couple of years in that superheated water. Their cousins near cold seeps, where there's no vent heat at all, reach similar lengths but grow slowly and can live past 250 years. A wild difference in lifespan for animals that end up roughly the same size. Cold seep ecosystems like these, sustained by chemosynthesis rather than sunlight, support entire food webs that science is still only beginning to map. Lion's mane jellyfish trail tentacles that have been recorded at over 30 meters, longer than a blue whale. Giant amphipods belonging to the genus Alicella, which look like oversized versions of the tiny shrimp-like creatures you'd find in a tide pool, show the same scaling at depth, sometimes growing many times larger than their shallow water relatives. Even sponges and certain marine worms follow the trend, quietly growing to sizes that would be unheard of anywhere closer to the surface. These animals aren't just curiosities either. Many of them are scavengers, and that role matters more than it might seem. Giant isopods, for instance, can apparently go without a meal for years at a time, then gorge on a whale carcass or a dead fish that drifts down from above, carried as marine snow, the slow rain of organic particles that falls from shallower waters and ultimately feeds much of the abyssal zone. Processing nutrients that would otherwise just sit on the seafloor, these oversized scavengers are quietly doing the job of recycling matter across one of the largest habitats on the planet. Put it all together, and you get what people online love to call deep sea monsters, though monster might be the wrong word. These animals aren't malformed or freakish. They're following the same evolutionary rules as everything else on the planet, just under conditions so extreme that the rules produce wildly different results. So why does this keep happening? Scientists have circled this question for decades, and there's still no single, agreed-upon answer. But a few theories keep surfacing, and each one captures a piece of the puzzle. The first comes from a biologist named Max Kleiber, and it's known as Kleiber's law. Kleiber found that an animal's metabolic rate doesn't scale evenly with its size. It scales to roughly the 3/4 power of its mass. In plain terms, bigger animals burn energy more efficiently per unit of body weight than smaller ones do. Double an animal's mass, and its energy needs don't double too. They grow by a smaller fraction, which means more of that mass gets to just exist rather than constantly being burned for fuel. In a place like the abyss where food might not show up again for weeks, that efficiency isn't a luxury, it's survival. A larger body can coast through long stretches of scarcity that would starve something smaller. The second idea borrows from Bergmann's rule, originally used to explain why warm-blooded animals in colder climates tend to be bigger than their relatives near the equator. A bigger body has less surface area relative to its volume, which means it loses heat more slowly. Applied to the deep sea, the logic suggests that growing larger helps these animals hang on to what little warmth they have. It's a tidy explanation, but it has critics. Cold environments are usually also low-resource environments, and some researchers argue that body size in the deep sea has more to do with fat storage and feast or famine feeding patterns than with conserving heat. A third theory, sometimes called the oxygen temperature hypothesis, ties metabolism and oxygen together. Cold water holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water does. Slower metabolism plus more available oxygen means an animal can support a bigger body without running into the kind of respiratory limits that would cap its size in warmer oxygen, poorer water. This theory has picked up real traction with researchers studying creatures like deep-sea pycnogonids, the sea spiders that grow far larger at depth than anywhere else. And then there's a simpler, more mechanical explanation, buoyancy. On land, gravity is the limiting factor. Bones and muscles have to fight it constantly, which is exactly why the biggest land animals, elephants among them, max out at a fraction of the size of the biggest sea creatures. Underwater, the water itself supports the body's weight. An animal doesn't need a skeleton built to fight gravity, it just needs enough biology to keep growing. Remove the weight problem, and the ceiling on size goes up dramatically. None of these theories fully explains abyssal gigantism on its own, and that's probably the most honest answer science can give right now. It's likely some combination of slow metabolism, abundant dissolved oxygen, reduced predation pressure, patchy but rich food sources, and the sheer physical freedom that comes from living suspended in water rather than standing on solid ground. Untangling exactly how much each factor contributes is brutally difficult, mostly because the abyss itself is so hard to reach. Most of it sits far beyond where submarines can safely operate, and every research expedition into these depths is expensive, slow, and limited in what it can observe. Modern research relies heavily on remotely operated vehicles, the unmanned submersibles that institutions like the Schmidt Ocean Institute and MBARI, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, send down on cables to film and sample the seafloor in real time. These ROVs have completely changed what's possible, letting scientists watch deep sea animals behave naturally instead of studying dead specimens hauled up in nets. Solo crewed dives have pushed boundaries too. James Cameron descended to Challenger Deep alone in the Deep-Sea Challenger in 2012, and Victor Vescovo reached the bottom of all 5 oceans in 2019, each expedition adding new layers of data to what we know. But even with all that technology, a single dive can only cover a tiny patch of ocean floor, and the abyssal zone stretches across more than half the planet's surface. For every hour of footage scientists collect, there are thousands of square kilometers of seafloor that have never been seen by a camera or a human eye. There's also a darker thread running through all of this. The deep sea has stayed remarkably stable for millions of years. Down there, temperature barely shifts, there's no real concept of seasons, and conditions that have held steady for that long tend to produce species that are exquisitely adapted to stability rather than change. Researchers like Camilo Mora, who studies how marine life responds to a warming planet, have raised concerns that this same trait, the thing that let these giants thrive for so long, could become their biggest vulnerability. Mora has pointed out that species living at extreme depth are used to such small, gradual temperature changes that they may have never needed to evolve any tolerance for rapid shifts at all. A species built around tiny, slow temperature variation may not have the tools to cope with warming driven by a changing climate, even warming that would barely register in shallower, more variable waters where surface species deal with constant fluctuation already. In other words, the very stability that allowed abyssal gigantism to flourish for so long might leave these creatures with nowhere to adapt to once that stability finally breaks. So the next time you see a photo of a giant isopod or hear about the colossal squid's eyes, remember that you're looking at the result of one of the most extreme natural experiments on the planet. Strip away sunlight, drop the temperature, crank up the pressure, and somehow life doesn't shrink to survive, it grows. The abyss didn't build monsters. It built some of the most efficient, most resilient survivors evolution has ever produced, and we're still only beginning to understand how they got there.